On the color spectrum, anger is red. It's a hot color, and that heat is necessary for all aspects of the warm, lighter yellow tones that are part of both the emotional landscape and the color landscape. In terms of anger's place in the creative process, life's program of individuation starts with sympathy. If we look at a child is sympathetic, open, neutral, innocent to whatever is told to them, and begins its life in copying and adaptation. As a child moves into the adolescent stage, it is one of antipathy, rebellion, with anger. The sympathetic phase could be characterized in the fight, flight, freeze dynamic as fear. I have to comply with what's going on around me, etc., or I won't survive. I have to learn this language, I have to do these things, I have to respect this boundary, etc., or I won't survive. But whether or not that sympathy is one of love, of joy, of acceptance, the period of individuation, the creative act for something new to be born, there must be a state of breaking orbit. You can also see that creative process in a journey. One must break away from the status quo. And if you look at the dynamic of space flight, the vast majority of energy spent in an entire spaceflight mission is breaking out of orbit. It's breaking out of the gravitational pull. And what's used to do that is a tremendous amount of thrust. If you look at the amount of fire, of jet fuel that's coming out of the back of a Falcon Heavy liftoff, as a giant mass of energy is going out into space to explore the unknown, it is an incredible regulated thrust in opposition to gravity, to the pull to remain normal, to the pull to remain earthbound. And in order to get out there, in order to go on a journey that's worth going on, in order to bring life to new places, one must be willing to focus and exert that amount of thrust to get liftoff. Now, once you're out there, once you're dissociated from the gravitational pull and the status quo, you don't need that form of regulation, and the creative process moves to synthesis. You have sympathy, antipathy, synthesis. You have the yes, you have the no, and then you have the synthesis. Now, in the maturation process, sympathy is known as the state of the child. Antipathy is known as the state of the adolescent. And synthesis is the state of new life or the adult. Because the adult in each individual emerges in the synergy of that which they are sympathetic to, the childlike state, and that which they are antipathetic to, the adolescent stage, the yes and the no, which are both extreme and relatively useful states, because in the yes, you've got the unconscious acceptance of the status quo, which is always imperfect. every status quo that has ever been on the cultural landscape is imperfect. And the rebellion, the antipathy of the status quo is also imperfect, and it's also an extreme. You have the extreme yes, the unconscious yes. Then you have the extreme rebellion that marks the awareness that this isn't okay. I don't like the racism in my cult. I don't like the chauvinism in my cult. I don't like the injustice directed by this parent to this child. I say, fuck that. I say no. Antipathy, away from something, breaking orbit. And yet, for that to complete its creative process, it then needs to move to synthesis. After antipathy, after breaking orbit, something new needs to be born. And it is that willingness to make a change, to get out of bed, to tell the truth. It's that willingness to move from passivity to activity in antipathy. That is the role of anger, irritation, dissatisfaction in the creative act. You do not get individuation without rebellion from the status quo. It's impossible for a new form of consciousness to come into being without the antipathy of rejecting the norm, the status quo. It's why every adolescent in a healthy culture goes through the state of listing everything that's wrong with their parents, everything that's wrong with the world, everything that's wrong with the government, everything that's wrong with their car, everything that's wrong with their friends, everything that's wrong. Because you can't create anything new from the position that everything is wonderful exactly as it is, and just go along and do exactly what your parents did in exactly the same way because everything is wonderful. The innocence of the child. It's the adolescent that breaks free with that anger and rebellion that then leads to the opportunity to form a new pattern of energy. And that's called the adult. The synthesis of the best parts of the yes and the best parts of the no. I like my mother's corn tamale bake. I don't like her hypocrisy. I like my mother's soft touch. I don't like her shame and her rages at her children. I like the way that this and that clothing match together. I don't like the obsession with looks over substance. I don't like gives rise to a new pattern of energy, a synergy that is more than the sum of the parts. Anger is another face of pain. And it's also another facet of the fight, flight, freeze triad in traumatic response. So where fear moves to flight, anger moves to fight. And in the reptilian brain, that ancient and sociopathic protocol of fight, flight, or freeze, one fights that which is smaller than you. One runs from that which is bigger than you. And one freezes when neither of those options seem readily available. So anger is the response to energy, could be opportunity, or it could be threat, a pain, a probable pain that can be conquered with fighting. Another thing that anger is a marker of the violation of a boundary. So if you think of your physical body, it has a boundary, and it is a boundary that we identify with. So anger is not just the response to the violation of any boundary, it's the violation of a boundary that we identify with, that we say, this is good and I believe in good things. Now we're identified with it indirectly. Or this is mine and I want it to be like this. This is my house. This is the boundary. This is my land. And I identify with it because it's mine. And when that boundary is crossed, meaning someone touches my body inappropriately, i.e. not the way I wanted them to touch my body. So I'm identifying with a way that I want to be touched, and I'm identifying with something, a body, and someone is touching my body in a way I don't want to be touched. Now, anger is one of the probable responses, particularly when operating out of the reptilian brain of fear, of response to threat. Then if someone is smaller than us and they're violating a boundary, we will express anger. If they're much bigger than us, i.e., the police, the FBI, a SWAT team is violating our boundaries, then it tends to move more into fear and compliance or freeze. But if it's another person that is in equal mass, meaning it's not like they have a gun, we don't, or they're much bigger than us, they're the bully or a gang, then we hold our own. We defend with anger a boundary that has been violated. Anger is the mark of conflict when one is bigger than the projected enemy. Back to that thing, one tends to fight and assert that which is in a conflict when the opponent is smaller than us, while running from what is bigger than us. So the response to anger is often an indication. For example, a child in a conflict with a parent, or a student in conflict with a teacher, will tend to move to fear. The authority, the bigger one, is in conflict with me. And the reality is that most of the time, the bigger one prevails. We're not talking about morality or anything. We're talking about mass. So in a conflict with a teacher or a parent or an authority figure, one tends to feel fear, whereas the authority figure tends to feel anger. You know, if you violate your parent's boundary in some way, they will tend to get angry. If the parent violates the child's boundary, often the response is fear, because a conflict results in further pain due to the law of mass. Number 4, anger is voiced to cover fear when fear is shamed. So as one moves out of pain, and both anger and fear are different responses to pain or the threat of pain. And fear is shamed. For example, in chauvinistic cultures, where feminine energy and emotion is diminished, particularly for men, if there is a demonstration of fear in a conflict, the man is shamed, is viewed to be a coward, and being a coward, i.e. afraid, is shamed. Then anger can be a reaction to felt fear. So a bully is intimidating me, and I feel scared. But as I move to express the fear, I realize that I'm in a cultural dynamic in which my fear is going to be pummeled. There's a bigger bully called the culture. And the culture is an agreement in all the witnesses that says, if I respond to this in fear because I'm smaller and uncertain of victory, that I am less than, which then leads to a bigger fear of being shamed, which reverts back into anger. So I'm afraid of this encounter because there's a big energy coming towards me, and I'm uncertain of victory. As I move to express that fear in a culture that shames fear, I am aware that the impact of being socially diminished, shamed and isolated, perhaps by my gang or my peer group, is a much bigger threat. And I realize I'd rather have a broken nose, a broken arm, and be beat up without backing down or running than I would rather be called a coward and disowned by my clique, by my cult, by my gang. And so I'm going to express anger as an expression of a bigger fear, a fear of being shamed. Anger is an addiction in thought by generating intensity and adrenaline. So anger is a very enervating thing, and the chemicals that are released in the body around something such as righteous anger flood in, and they're a bit like coffee. They wake you up, they get you engaged, you feel alive, you feel real in a similar way to many people who take cocaine or some other stimulant. And so if I'm not able to engage due to the letdown, the withdrawal symptoms, there hasn't been enough to enrage me, recently, I may repetitively think the thoughts that I have come to learn, produce these chemicals in my body, fire myself up, and produce, among other things, adrenaline to get moving, to get me going, to get out of bed, just like my cup of coffee. And so in this way, this is the face of anger that is an addiction. And the addiction is to a habit of thinking and a habit of gesturing and doing, getting animated. Now, one could go to the gym, of course, and do that and produce many of these chemicals. But for some of us, the habit has formed that in order to get up, we get righteous and angry about something. And there's always something. If we've decided that fish are good, then the people destroying and overfishing are bad. If we've decided that forests are good, then those evil loggers are bad. If we've decided that the other political party is out to lunch, then, there's another one. And whatever it is that gets us fired up with righteous indignation or anger, we think those thoughts, and we think them quickly, and we go through a list of them. We get all fired up. We feel anger, and it gives us our fix. Now we can move on. I've gotten my little adrenaline rush. I've woken up. I've gotten back in my body, and now we can get on the day. And no, I'm not particularly going to do anything about fish or plant a tree. That would be logical if I care about trees. How about making a donation to a tree fund? No, I'm just going to go through the motions of thinking those things, getting all worked up, and then I'll get on with my day now that I've got some energy. Anger can transform or destroy or fuel our reality. So anger is a change agent. It's a little bit like gasoline. And you think of gasoline, it's neutral, or coffee, it's neutral. You can drink a cup of coffee and go watch porn. You can drink a cup of coffee and go babysit some children that need babysitting, or plant some trees, or make a good meal, or prepare a beautiful card for your partner. So you can wake up and engage, and once you've woken up and engaged, once you've got fuel to move your body, to move your mind, you can now use that fuel to transform an aspect of reality, to destroy an aspect of reality, or fuel an aspect. You've got a system going, and now you've got the energy to maintain it. Or you don't like a system, and so you're motivated. You're going over there now to put a stop and have your say, and moving these boxes. You get out of. You use anger to pull weeds, to cut down overgrown this or that, to push a car, to throw stuff in a dumpster, to whatever it is. You can use this fuel in a neutral way to transform or change or destroy or create something new. I'm so angry with the way children are being treated that I'm going to create a better daycare, or whatever it is. Another face of anger is defending against helplessness, hopelessness, and acceptance. So you may look at the world, the problems of the world, and just say, it's just so big, this is happening and this is happening. I just feel so depressed. I feel so helpless. I feel hopeless. And there's nothing that can be done. I'm tired. Well, as we feel small and helpless, one of the counter balance reactions is no. I'm not going to be marginalized. I'm determined to engage. So, fuck that feeling. I'm going to get something done today. I'm going to do something now. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to be hopeless. And in that way, I'm going to start something moving again. Now, anger is also part of the grieving process. So when someone dies or something dies, the identity that we formed in order to relate to that person, meaning if you have a mother, you have an identity as a child, or as maybe a fellow, if you've moved beyond the child state or the adolescent state and are actually as an adult, I've got a relationship with this woman. And around this woman, I think these things. And around this woman, I feel these things when I think these things. And around this woman, I say these things. And around this woman, I do these things. And I don't do this. And this is an identity. It's a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing that I do. And I only do it exactly like that around this person. Because an identity, a pattern of interaction, is formed around a person, an environment, a thing, a role. This is what I do at work. This is what I do with mom. This is what I do with dad. This is what I do with Sister Sarah, whatever it is. These are parts of us that have been developed, consciously or unconsciously, to relate to specific things. Now, when that thing dies, let's say mom moves away and says, I'm not going to talk to you again, so there's no more interaction. Well, the identity that formed to relate to mom slowly dies because there's no way to build the muscle and maintain that identity when she's not there. No, you can do it somewhat in your head. You can keep mom alive in your head and have conversations in your head. Oh, I'm not going to be like, no one's going to talk to me like that again. And you remember what she said before, and then you react to it, and you can keep the identity alive. But when you really let in and let go, mom's gone, really gone. She's not going to come back. She's never going to say those things again. She may have moved on and not be thinking about them. Who knows? But that part of reality that I've been relating to, it's just gone. There is a dying process of identity. The part in us that related to that starts to die. And the first stage of the letting go process, the disengaging and the death of our identity around that thing, that role, that person, starts to fade away. And it leaves space for something new, but we lose a part of ourselves that we have been identifying with. I was the one who did, but now I'm no longer that because you've gone. I used to play with you, your child, your little girl. But now you don't let me play that role because you've grown up. You're no longer that little girl. I can't be the person I know myself to be around you. I don't know who I am. You've changed. And so the identity that I've formed around you has got to let go and change with it. There's a death inside, a death of identity. And we don't like change. We don't like death in our culture. So this is initially met with denial. No, it hasn't changed. We're still gonna talk. Now you're 4,000 miles away, but nothing has changed. We're not, there's denial. Then there's anger in the process. I don't like it. Why did you move away? Why did you have to die? This and that and the other. There's anger. And that anger is part of the grieving process. Then you go on to bargaining. Okay, fine, you've moved away. But what if I change this and that and the other, and will you move back? Or what if I got off drugs? Would you date me again? There's bargaining. And ultimately, in a dying process, the bargaining does not restore the identity. It just gives us a little bit of time to adjust, and we get depressed. It's not coming back. No, I've tried to manipulate. I've tried to manipulate God. I've tried to manipulate, the universe, everyone around me. It's just not working. There's depression. And finally, there's acceptance, change, death and rebirth, and the birth of something new. The death of one thing. All energy is neither created or destroyed, according to physicists. It is simply changed. This form of energy that's a hand rots away and becomes nitrogen. It doesn't just become nitrogen. The nitrogen is absorbed into a plant. It doesn't just do that. Then that one energy forms into another energy, forms into another. So anger is a fundamental part of the grieving process. The next thing that anger is a defense of something we are attached to. Now, this kind of ties back to the first thing where we talk about, anger marks the violation of a boundary. What anger is attempting to do with that energy is restore the boundary. Hey, you're coming into my house without permission. Get out. That's anger. That's assertive energy in response to a perceived boundary violation. So anger is a defense to something we're attached to. What are we attached to? We're attached to the idea this is my house. We're attached to the idea that people should knock and shouldn't come in my house without my permission. And you just walked in. That's crossing a boundary. So it's a defense. It's a behavior. Hey, back up or I'll shoot, don't come around here again, whatever it is, I have an attachment to something, and I'm defending my attachment to that thing. Number 10, anger is, or expressing anger verbally leads to awareness of our attachment and projected threats to our attachment. So if we talk about what we're angry about, it will lead our awareness to, one, what we're attached to. I want this. And two, what's threatening that? Like, I want this, and this is threatening that. And can lead to an awareness. I'm attached to this. This is threatening what I'm attached to. Or I'm projecting. I see this as a threat. I'm attached to this for whatever reason. And I see this as a threat to that for this and this and this reason. And in that can bring awareness. Now, the expression of anger and the consciousness of what we value and what appears to threaten that value is a constructive form. It brings to more awareness and can lead to healthy choices. One, is that a good thing to be attached to? Like, don't touch my smokes. And you're threatening to rob me of my freedoms to, smoke as much as I want and do this and don't do that. Okay, so I'm really attached to this, and I see this as the threat. This provides an opportunity to, evaluate, is that really what a healthy attachment is? Perhaps I should be more attached to, cutting debt, paying off credit cards, and less attached to buying cigarettes for my well-being, because what we're attached to does not directly relate to our well-being in many cases. I'm attached to this person who abuses me and puts me down. Don't take him away from me. And you're threatening the status quo of this. But in some cases, with awareness, we can evaluate, is the attachment healthy? Am I attached to something that's actually going to take me where I want to go? Number two is this really a threat to where I want to go? Is there another way to get to where I want to go? Is the person doing what they're doing specifically to ruin my life? Or do they just have an objective that they're attached to, that they want to get where they want to go, and it just happens to collide? And is there a way to negotiate that, etc.? But the bringing to consciousness of what we're attached to and the perceived threat is an opportunity to edit the script a little bit, to intervene some consciousness in the reaction, and in doing so, lead to some constructive outcome, a higher amount of well-being. Now, the 11th phase of anger that we're going to talk about here is suppressing anger leads to a buildup of unconscious and explosive expression, which can damage our attachments. So we when let's say we're married and we're attached to monogamy, for better or for worse, we're attached to monogamy, and this person is flirting and this, but we say, oh, I don't want to be angry, I don't want to be upset about this, and and then they get the message it's okay, and pretty soon they're doing this and touching inappropriately, and then there can be an explosive because we didn't acknowledge what we were attached to. Number one. Number two, we didn't express the boundary. Number three, we didn't evaluate options and communicate it when there was a lower charge. So when we suppress, I shouldn't be attached, I shouldn't be angry, I shouldn't care about this, I'm just going to, look off the other way, think positively. That energy that acknowledges the truth of our attachment and the perceived threat can explosively erupt in such a way that, for example, the partner that we're seeking to express some honor around may be frightened of that explosive, out of control violence or violation in return, or intensity of energy. And so suppressed anger leads to a buildup of unconscious and explosive energy, which when expressed unconsciously can destroy the very thing that we are attached to. And the 12th face that I'm going to look at is that anger is experienced when our hierarchy of human needs is thwarted. It is what we experience when we're trying to flow. We have an idea that our well-being will benefit if we drive our car to X place. And we get on the freeway, we want to go there, and there's heavy traffic. So all this traffic is blocking our flow. So anger is what we experience when a flow that we're attached and invested in is blocked. I want to go here, you're stopping me. Hey, why are you stopping me? Get out of my way. And so it's the block of flow. And at the deepest level, we as human beings have underlying needs. All human beings in the history of humankind, for example, have a deep desire to feel sustainably better, to grow, to evolve, to become in such a way that feels better. And we simultaneously, in polarity, have the opposing need to avoid feeling chronically worse. We need to feel good. We want to feel good. We want and need to avoid pain, particularly incredibly high levels of pain. We need to avoid feeling chronically worse and move towards feeling sustainably better. Now, Abraham Maslow, in studies of healthy people around the planet, identified a hierarchy of human needs. Number one is survival. And the reason that this word hierarchy is important is, in this pyramid that we're building of hierarchical needs, there are, like, for example, later, level 4, the need for self-esteem, to embody one's ideals. So whatever your ideals are, Rambo tough guy, okay, he's my ideal, okay? Well, that involves lifting weights, learning martial arts, whatever it is that you've associated with that ideal. Now, you feel self-esteem, good about yourself, when you are disciplined in your efforts to become your ideal. If it's Jesus Christ, if it's Rambo, if it's President Carter, whatever it is, I aspire to be like this, and I feel good about myself when I'm making steady progress. That's self-esteem. Well, self-esteem is somewhat irrelevant if you're dead. That's why there's a hierarchy. So your first hierarchical need is survival. I need to survive before I can do anything else. I have a need. Life has a need to survive, to become. I have a need to survive. Now, as soon as I've met my need to survival, level 1, I have a need to feel secure in my survival. If I'm expecting to die at any moment, I'm really not that interested in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. I'm worried about how can I stay alive the next moment? How can I get out of this horrible traffic accident? Shut up. I need to focus here because my survival is insecure. So survival, security of survival. Now, level 3 is love and belonging. Now, love and belonging in a cultural framework, in a free market capitalist framework such as our own, is essential to survive. If you take a 2-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 50-year-old and put them alone without contact with any other person on some island in the middle of nowhere, their odds of survival go way down. But if you put them in a complex ecology of a growing culture, their odds of survival go up unless they cross cult taboos. So if you fit in with a cult and don't cross the cult taboos, whatever they are, then your odds of survival and security go way up. because you've got the alliance with a large group of technologically sophisticated human beings. And so love and belonging is a need. It's a social need. It's a mammalian need. You don't have a species without a certain amount of affection expressed in love and belonging. You don't have survival. Your children certainly don't if you're dead, or if you cannot find a mate because there is no love and belonging available. It is a need, like oxygen, like food, love and belonging. So when we are seeking in our own way, because we all get environmentally programmed, some of us get cross-wired and believe that the best way to get something is to ask for the opposite of what we want. If we have a sadistic parent where every time we say, how about, could we have this? The parent says, no, you're definitely not having that. Then the child may learn, for example, to ask for the opposite of what they want so that the parent will think they're punishing them and give them what they actually want, or the sadistic brother, or whatever it is. But we have the need to meet survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing our gifts, bringing them out into the world abundantly and successfully, and becoming a part of something bigger than ourselves, transcending the ego, transcending the myopia, the illusion of isolation. We have a need to be part of something bigger than ourselves. It could be a religion, it could be science, it could be world ecology, it could be our community, but it's bigger than us. These are our human needs. And when we're moving towards survival, you know, we're hungry and we're moving to food, and someone says, no, you're not going to get any food. If they're much bigger than us, we may feel fear, I'm going to die. If they're not insurmountable, we may feel anger. Who the fuck are you to block me from staying alive by eating? I'm angry because I need, my drive is taking me here, and you are an impediment to me meeting my human needs, to realizing my human potential. You know, your parent says, no, you're not going to music school. I don't care about that. Musicians don't make any money. I don't care about this and that and the other. Your talent, your aesthetic, your dream of embodying your self-esteem, because these are the people who are your role models. These are the people who touch your soul, and you're trying to become that, and your parent is knocking it down, saying, no, I forbid you to go to this concert, to do this, to do this. You're going to feel anger because something deep inside you of who you are is wanting to grow and blossom. And you're encountering frost. You're encountering resistance to self-actualization. And anger will reveal that encounter. It'll let you know there's a part of you that wants to express, a part of you that wants to become, a part of you that wants to move, and it's encountering friction. And if understood consciously, if brought to awareness and partnered with to liberate yourself from that restriction in some way. I'm going to sneak around and study music secretly. I'm going to do this. That will bring release of the anger. The anger will serve as a pivot to circumnavigate the obstacle and continue to grow in a constructive way. I'm Dane Rose, and thanks for watching.